Hey, my friend, I'm sure you've heard about stem cells. Did you know that stem cells have amazing powers to heal your body, but also to keep it young as the years go on? On this episode, I bring on a stem cell expert who's going to tell you more about what stem cells do in your body and why they're so important, but also he's going to tell you how he's found a way to get your own body to naturally produce more of your own stem cells, or I should say, naturally release more of your own stem cells so that you can heal faster and stay younger for longer. Stay tuned for an exciting episode. If you're interested in getting thicker, fuller, and stronger hair, make sure to check out fullyvital.com. We've put together a set of 100% natural products that help stimulate the hair follicles from 4 different ways. So check out fullyvital.com to get thicker, fuller, and stronger hair. If you're enjoying the episodes on this channel, make sure to click the subscribe link down below so you can get notified when we release new episodes. Our goal with this channel is to help you look and feel younger and live your most adventurous life. So make sure to subscribe so you can get notified when we release new episodes. Hey, my friend, welcome back to the Anti-Aging Hacks podcast. Today, my guest is very special because we're going to talk all about stem cells. His name is Christian Drapeau, and he's a stem cell expert and holds a master's degree from McGill University in neurophysiology. He's the author of several articles in the field of epileptogenesis, and then later in the field of stem cell research, specifically on a new therapeutic approach called endogenous stem cell mobilization, as well as the bestseller Cracking the Stem Cell Code, a book that I've been reading for the last few days. He created and developed the concept of stem cell enhancer, as well as the first natural product supporting the natural role of stem cells in the body. He's been the director of research and development for many companies. He is now the founder and CEO of Calugen, where he developed the product StemRegen. With that said, Christian, welcome to the Anti-Aging Hacks show.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.
So I've had the opportunity to have a couple of conversations with you over the last few weeks. Also, I have your product at hand, which I haven't started using yet. But in terms of your background and how you got into stem cells and your credibility in this field, what can you tell us? Walk us through how you got started with stem cells and now where you're at.
Okay, well, I got in stem cells really through what one could call, the traditional scientific approach. You make an observation, you try to understand it. So you make a hypothesis and then you go in the lab and you test your hypotheses. So it started in 1994 when I started to work with an aquatic botanical called Aphanisomon plus aqua, in short AFA. It's Klamath Lake blue-green algae. Mm-hmm. So I was hired by a company to study what this plant was doing in the body to support health claims or claims that would be done to market this product as part of the new Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act. So we found some very good active compounds that explains the benefit on the mind, on the immune system, on inflammation. But as I was doing all these studies, I came across a number of cases of people who reversed, severe conditions touching cardiac function, lung function, pancreatic function, brain function. It was touching so many different aspects of human health that really we had no understanding of what the plant was doing until 2001, when a colleague of mine sent me a paper, and the title of this article was Turning Blood into Brain. The first observation at a time when stem cells are only known to be precursors to blood cells. There's an article on my desk that describes how stem cells have been found to be able to migrate in the brain and become a brain cell. So it pushed me to go into the library. At the time, the internet was not there as it is today, and start to look for other articles that may document the ability of stem cells to become other things than just brain cells. Because in the back of my mind was, if stem cells can become brain in other tissues, and then I did find in the literature that at the time, there was also documentation that stem cells could become liver and heart cells. So in the back of my mind was, if stem cells can become brain, liver, and heart, that means they can also become lung, pancreas, skin, and everything else. How can a stem cell, from a physiological standpoint, become these 3 tissues and not the rest? And if they do become the rest, all these tissues, that means stem cells are your repair system. At the time, these were like really far-fetched hypotheses. I was ridiculed many, many times. To me, it just made sense. And in the back of my mind, again, the reason for this was, if stem cells are the repair system, then if you have a product that supports stem cell release from the bone marrow, stem cells will go in the pancreas of the diabetic, the heart of the cardiac patient, the brain of the Parkinson patient. It would explain why we have all these this broad variety of benefits. So it's a lot of hypotheses, one on top of the other, but they all turned out to be true. So we documented in 2001 that this blue-green algae, one of its main mechanisms of action is to trigger the release of stem cells from the bone marrow. So that was really the birth of the whole concept that I've developed for the past 20 years.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for sharing. And I've been reading your book and learning a lot more about stem cells. I've been very interested in this field for the last few years because, as you know, they're important for longevity and anti-aging. They're also one of the hallmarks of aging that have been described in many articles and journals. And, you know, they say that the stem cells exhaustion will lead to faster aging. And we'll get to exhaustion in a bit. You also touched on stem cells serving as repair functions in the body. So just to round out that piece, why, in your opinion, should people pay very important attention to stem cells, and what are they doing exactly in the body? Is it just repair? Is it more than repair?
I mean, it's not a simple explanation, but if we do a good job here, I think we'll be able to show that stem cells are actually pretty much the cornerstone of health. How healthy you are today, and also how healthy you will remain as you age, or any so-called age-related diseases that you may develop, they all tie to stem cells. So stem cells are primarily, or I shouldn't say primarily, because it's probably the other way around. But let's say from your life perspective, they're primarily your repair system. If you have an injury, anything, you have a broken bone, a cut to your skin, stroke, heart attack, whatever, the affected tissue will release compounds that will trigger the release of stem cells from your bone marrow. Within a few days after the injury or the incident, you will have a 3 to 10-fold increase in the number of circulating stem cells. These stem cells go everywhere in the body, but when they go into the fine capillaries of the affected tissue locally, that affected tissue, the injury, will release compounds that will cause stem cells to migrate in that tissue, in that very area. And when stem cells touch cellular debris of that tissue, injured cells, then it will trigger the multiplication of these stem cells and their conversion into cells of that tissue, literally repairing the tissue. So that's sort of the acute use of stem cells. Mm-hmm. But in the background, so more to answer your question, in the background, there's another role of stem cells that was discovered. And maybe let me talk about how this was discovered, because it's a fascinating, I want people to understand, this is not just nice ideas. This is things that were discovered as we do research, and then we make what we call incidental observation. We didn't study this specifically, but we observed it. So let's say you make a study to look at the effect of stem cells for heart attack, for example. So the typical study is that you take female mice, and then you trigger heart attack in the female mice, and then you inject male stem cells. They have the Y chromosome, so you can follow all the cells that will become heart cells, because they will be heart cells with the Y chromosome. At the end of the study, they're left with a number of mice. They keep them in the lab. And let's say 10 months later, they decide to look at the entire mouse. And now they find that not only stem cells have become cells of the heart, but you can find cells with the Y chromosome in the brain, in the lung, in the pancreas, in the skin, in virtually everywhere in the body, while none of these tissues were injured. So they play a role in repairing a specific tissue that needs repair, but in the background, they migrate in every single tissue of the body in this normal process of tissue renewal. Meaning, I'm sure you've heard of these statements, you have a new body every 7 years, every 12 years. The time here is not relevant, or let me put it this way, your entire body is constantly in a process of turnover, but the time to renew your liver is 2-3 years. To renew your pancreas, 4, 5, 6 years. Your lung, 4, 5, 6 years. Your heart, you have a new heart, let's say half of a new heart every 25 years. Your skin every month. Every tissue renews at a different pace, at a different rate, but your body is constantly in this process of tissue turnover. You lose cells, and if you want to stay healthy, you need to replace the cells that are being lost. This is a core role of your stem cells in your body. The problem is that your red marrow that makes stem cells, and that red marrow is present in all your bones at birth. As you age, that red marrow transforms into yellow marrow. That conversion happens very rapidly in your life. By age 30, you have lost probably 90 to 95% of your red marrow. And that it reflects a very sharp decline in how many stem cells are in your bloodstream in order to participate to tissue repair and tissue renewal. That's about the time when you realize that you're not Superman, Superwoman. Before that, your mortality never crossed your mind. And now when you're like mid-30s, well, your injuries don't repair as fast. You start to realize that now you start to have a concern for your health. That's because you no longer have enough stem cells to fully compensate for tissue repair and tissue maintenance. And from that point on, this decline in the number of stem cells in circulation will dictate how well you will age. Let me state that in another way. If we count the number of stem cells present in people who have developed atherosclerosis, heart disease, diabetes, multiple sclerosis, lupus, erectile dysfunction, COPD, kidney failure, I mean, the list keeps growing. All these people have on average a little bit less than half the number of stem cells that you find in healthy people. There's a direct link between how many stem cells are in your bloodstream, and your ability to stay healthy. So that is why stem cells are really your cornerstone of health. There's a lot of things that you can do for health. You need minerals, you need vitamins, NAD. I mean, there's just tons of things that are good, to support the health of your body. But the cornerstone of your health is how many stem cells are present in your bloodstream every day of your life to repair and maintain the health of your tissue.
Mm-hmm. Well,
sorry if it was a long answer, but it really paints the picture here of what stem cells do in your body.
Yeah, no, that's a great painting the picture, so to speak. So let's touch on, before we move on, Christian, I'd like to ask you about the different types of stem cells, because there's this confusion about embryonic stem cells, which were banned or regulated. And then there's the adult stem cells, which there's different varieties of those. We hear about mesenchymal stem cells, hematopoietic stem cells. Now there's this new buzz about V cells. So tell us about what all these different types of stem cells are and why they're important.
Okay, well, because this discussion can very quickly get quite complex, but those that you name are easy to define. So embryonic stem cells, as the name implies, they are present in the very, very early embryo. So you're talking about 8 to 10 days old embryo called the blastula. And in that embryo, very young embryo, then you have these cells that are going to lead to the creation of the entire full organism, a living organism. So these embryonic stem cells are called totipotent. Toti means all, everything. They have the ability to become everything in the body. These stem cells, as soon as you pass the embryonic stage, they're gone. They no longer exist in the body. So when we talk about umbilical cord stem cells, placenta stem cells, these are technically adult stem cells. So any stem cells after birth, around birth, or after birth are adult stem cells. Your two main adult stem cells, which then will divide into further subset of stem cells, are hematopoietic stem cells. These stem cells are responsible for making all your blood cells, and mesenchymal stem cells. These are stem cells that will have the ability, we know today, to become virtually any kind of other tissue cells in your body. I want to just put right there, I won't go deep into this because it gets really complicated, but it is important to recognize that while there's a big discussion about the fact that the type of stem cell is very important, I think it's a little bit also a consequence of our human need to label things, classify things, and then be very happy that we've put everything in the box that is very logical. Hematopoietic stem cells have been documented to be able to they can only become blood cells in theory. They've been shown to be able to become pancreatic cells making insulin, liver cells, functional liver cells. They're not as docile as we would like them to be to do what we want them to be from a scientific standpoint. Now, mesenchymal stem cells, they are traditionally the stem cells that you have in the bone marrow, originally believed to support the hematopoietic stem cells in the bone marrow. And now we discover they can actually become any kind of cells in your tissue. They normally they're called mesenchymal stem cells. They come from the mesenchyme, which is the mesoderm, which is this part of the blastula. Let's not go there. It's too complicated. Mesenchymal stem cells, they're another type of stem cells. What I was trying to say when I was saying this is that They were isolated first because of their ability to stick to glass. So you take stem cells or a bunch of cells, you spin them in a glass tube, you rinse your glass tube, your mesenchymal stem cells are sticking to the glass. That became the initial means of isolating them. And then later we find that if you do the same thing to fat tissue, there are cells in your fat tissue that stick to the glass. So they are mesenchymal stem cells, but your fat does not necessarily come from the mesoderm. So what I mean is that the name mesenchymal stem cells were attached to a typical type of stem cells. And now we realize it's a much broader class of stem cells. So let's keep it simple. Hematopoietic stem cells that make blood cells, mesenchymal stem cells can become virtually anything else in the body. And the V cells are a very interesting type of cell that have been discovered by more than one group. So they've received different names from different groups. V cells is the term that has stuck, if you want, in the scientific literature. But there are other names. For example, blastomere-like stem cells is the same kind of stem cells. They are described or defined specifically by their size. They are the size of a platelet, essentially. Mm-hmm. So when you extract your platelet from your blood, if you do, for example, a platelet-rich fraction or platelet-rich plasma, many people will tell you, no, this is very different from stem cells. These do not contain stem cells. It's not correct. They contain stem cells. They simply contain another type of stem cells that was unknown until fairly recently. They are very small. So V cells mean very small embryonic-like stem cells. Embryonic-like because they are much more potent than mesenchymal stem cells. They can become virtually everything in the body. They're not far from an embryonic stem cells in their capacity. They are probably the most potent stem cells that we have in our bodies. Some people have described them from coming from the bone marrow. Other teams have described them from coming from muscles. So muscles could be a bank, not a bank, a depository, if you want, a reservoir for these stem cells, and they can be released upon an injury. So that's sort of the different types of stem cells that are talked about. And that's why today, one of the means of using V cells, these very small embryonic-like stem cells, because they have a very interesting characteristics compared to mesenchymal stem cells. They can be found in a quiescent state, meaning like a dormant state, and in an activated state. And it was discovered that they can be activated by specific types of wavelength. Lasers, light that you shed on them, and it activates them. So today what is used in many labs is that we take your blood, we extract the platelets. In there, you have those V cells. You pass this through a laser light. Within a few hours, they get activated, and we can put them back into your body, and we have activated these V cells. So that is a treatment now that is available in some labs.
Very cool. Thank you for explaining all those. And so this is interesting because people get PRP. PRP has been around for 2 or 3 decades, yeah. And they get it for, especially their joints, so to speak.
Correct.
And some people do it on their face, called the vampire facial, and others. But you're saying there's V cells in the PRP as well. And if we can activate them, and it might take a few hours, then that would even improve the results from a PRP, which are all over the place, actually. Okay, good to know.
Correct.
So let's talk about the stem cells that are circulating in your blood versus stem cells that are in every tissue. In every organ and every tissue, I believe, or I've learned that there are stem cells there's stem cell niches in all these organs and tissues in your body, which can respond when there's injury, when there's trauma to that particular area of the body. But so how is the stem cells in the blood or from the bone marrow important on as layering on top of the tissue specific stem cells?
Your stem cells that you have in various tissues. And so just again, to put back into the historical context, already we have known for quite some time. When I was in college, I learned about these cells, satellite cells in muscles. You have oval cells in the liver. And we know today that these cells that had a different shape, that had a unique ability to multiply, well, they are the resident stem cells of these tissues. And then later on, we've pretty much discovered that every single tissue has its own layer of stem cells. The skin has epidermal stem cells, the brain has neuronal stem cells. They're everywhere. Every tissue has its layer of stem cells, or its niche of stem cells, as you call it. There are not enough stem cells in that niche or layer of stem cells to really fully participate in a full process of tissue repair if you have an injury. You don't have enough of these stem cells in the heart, for example, to fully repair after a heart attack. You don't have enough in the skin to fully repair after a cut. That's why you have a scar, because your fibroblasts locally will seal your cut. But if you have a lot of stem cells in circulation, they will migrate in the skin, become skin stem cells, participate to tissue repair. And we have cases, for example, with product that I have developed before that stimulate the release of your own stem cells, where we can see severe injury to the skin, and with virtually 2-3 weeks later, virtually no scars. Simply because if you have more stem cells in circulation, these circulating stem cells will replenish the tissue that have been exhausted by the use or the overuse of these stem cells. To maybe wrap this understanding even more, there is one condition that is very well known that is caused by stem cell exhaustion in a tissue, and it's all your diseases called, into this vast umbrella of irritable bowel syndrome, inflammatory bowel disease. It is an insult or an injury, call it however we want, locally to the tissue that now wants to repair, but it needs to repair constantly because that insult is constant. And after a while, that tissue gets depleted, exhausted of its local stem cell layer. And that's when the problem becomes pathological, because now that tissue can no longer repair. It is clear that the onset of these problems are exhaustion of stem cells that can be replenished by putting more stem cells in circulation. So we are now, the protocol is ready. We should soon start a study in France in a hospital with patients that have these kinds of issues with the digestive system, and to monitor what is the benefits, what kind of benefits is brought by increasing the number of stem cells in circulation.
Got it. Well, thank you for answering that, and glad to see that you're doing a study. Looking forward to the results of that. Okay, so from what I understood is that the local tissue-specific stem cells are typically not enough when there is trauma or injury that surpasses their ability to deal with the problem, and therefore you need cells from the blood, bone marrow, stem cells to come in and augment and help repair specific organs, specific tissues. And so now let's talk about the availability of these cells in the, I believe the bone marrow is where that's most important. And that's mesenchymal and V cells, as you mentioned, in some part. And so if we are releasing or improving the ability of the body to release from bone marrow, is there any danger of running out of bone marrow specific mesenchymal stem cells, or is there unlimited quantity of those?
Unlimited quantities. And this can be somewhat of a confusing concept or explanation. So let me try to approach it from various angles. Your red marrow transforms into yellow marrow. That is a process called conversion. So there is a shrinkage of your bone marrow, of your red marrow. That shrinkage is not related to a decline in how many stem cells are released from that bone marrow. It's just that you have less and less bone marrow releasing stem cells. That's where the decline is coming from. The number of stem cells that are released from your bone marrow can vary tremendously depending from individuals. We don't have today a good understanding of why some people are considered or called poor mobilizers and other people are good mobilizers. We don't all mobilize stem cells in the same way. And I believe that it is right there the reason why some people age gracefully with health and others don't age as well. It's how many stem cells they release. When you make your bone marrow release more stem cells, you are not going to deplete your bone marrow. Whatever is left of your red marrow is very strong, productive, renews itself. That is immortal. The stem cells that are there are immortal. They have telomerase. They will multiply during the entire life of an individual. Let me give you an example. There is one thing that you can do to trigger the release of stem cells from your bone marrow, and it is intense physical exercise. Running a marathon, going and training as an Olympic athlete, for example, you will release a lot of stem cells. So think of any Olympic athletes. Do they run out of stem cells because they trained when they were younger? No. Stem cell depletion from the bone marrow is not a phenomenon that we know. So it does not happen. you will have your bone marrow during your entire life. It shrinks naturally because of this process of conversion, but the marrow that you have will always produce stem cells. One of the physiological phenomenon that makes that possible is called asymmetrical cellular division. Everywhere in nature, you have a phenomenon called symmetrical cellular division, meaning the mother cell divides into two identical daughter cells. The DNA, the original DNA splits. One filament of the DNA goes in each cell, and each cells duplicate the other filament. So you get two identical daughter cells, except in the bone marrow. In the bone marrow, it is asymmetrical cellular division. Your original DNA goes into one daughter cells, two copies are made to go into the other daughter cells, and then this one goes into the blood circulation. The original DNA stays in the bone marrow. So when you release, let's say, 8 million stem cells from your bone marrow is not deprived of 8 million stem cells. It has a powerful ability to maintain itself. You can release many stem cells. Your bone marrow is virtually untouched.
I got you. And so I think you touched on this before, that even though there's cellular division happening in the bone marrow, the telomeres of these stem cells are not shortening because there's enough telomerase in there.
Correct.
So they can continue dividing. Even though the bone marrow itself is shrinking, the red bone marrow, there's still enough ability for it to keep providing you the stem cells at age 40 or age 80. Is that fair?
Of course. Otherwise, you would not survive without stem cells. Mm-hmm. So yes, there's stem cells. I mean, they published a report a number of years ago from somebody who died. I think it's like 110, but past 100, and that's what they wanted to go and see. How many stem cells? Like, do we have still stem cells in the bone marrow? And of course, the red marrow has shrunk significantly. Is it somewhere in the background a reason why we age and finally we die? Probably. Because your tissues are wearing out, because they don't have the ability to fully repair. But what is left of your bone marrow is still producing. It's not the inability of your bone marrow to release stem cells. It's just that it's shrinking as you age.
Gotcha. Okay. So then let's talk about the process. Let's say you get an injury, right? And I think for most people, let's just start with a wound, like a skin wound or even like a bone. And let's say you have that injury. What is the process? If you can just walk us through, Christian, let's say you're a stem cell, right? You're hanging out in the bone marrow and then you sense an injury, or the body senses an injury. How does that stem cell actually mobilize, get deployed into the local tissue and penetrate the tissue so it's actually doing something down there?
Okay, I'll try to keep that simple. So I'm a stem cell in the bone marrow. When there's an injury, the affected tissue will release a number of SOS molecules like granulocyte colony stimulating factor, GCSF, interleukin-8, stem cell factor, and there are a few others. These molecules, suddenly their concentration increases in the bloodstream. In the bone marrow, this is going to be sent. That molecule will go in the bone marrow, and in the bone marrow, that molecule will trigger, it's complicated, will trigger an enzyme. Okay, Now I'm a stem cell in the bone marrow. I'm hanging to the bone marrow through adhesion molecules that will adhere to the microenvironment of the bone marrow. So I attach and I cling to the bone marrow environment. These adhesion molecules are not permanent. They cling, and then suddenly the cell will shed that adhesion molecule. So I need to make these molecules constantly. So it's a very active process to have the stem cells cling and maintain itself in the bone marrow. If I can interfere with this process of renewing these adhesion molecule, then there's a point the stem cells no longer has these adhesion molecule, can no longer cling in the bone marrow, and it gets carried out and is carried into the blood flow. That's when the stem cells is released from the blood flow. The molecule that signals the stem cells to stay attached to the bone marrow is the same molecule that the affected tissue secretes locally to attract the bone marrow to an injury. It's the same process. So the process to attract a stem cell to an injury is the same that constantly keeps stem cells in the bone marrow. That molecule is called stromal derived factor 1, SDF1. So I'm a stem cell in the bone marrow. The bone marrow releases SDF1. It's telling me, keeps producing these adhesion molecule to cling to the bone marrow environment. When GCSF reaches the bone marrow, it secretes a specific enzymes that digest SDF1. Without FDF1, the cell loses the signal to stay to the bone in the bone marrow, and then it gets released. If that signal continues for a few days, which happens in an injury, I can have like 3 to 10-fold increase in the number of stem cells in circulation. So now these stem cells are carried in the blood flow and they go everywhere. As they circulate in the blood flow, they no longer have that signal from SDF1. So now they replenish their ability to have these adhesion molecules. So now they're in the blood flow, ready to respond again to this SDF1. When they circulate in the fine capillaries of the affected tissue, in the heart, for example, where you have a heart attack, locally, SDF1 is released to tell the stem cells, that's here that you now need to come. So when SDF1 touches the stem cell locally in that capillary, the stem cell will secrete this adhesion molecule and will grab the capillary wall in that area. If the stem cell continues to see that SDF1 is being released in that area, there's confirmation that, yeah, the injury is here. Now the stem cell will secrete enzymes that will digest the attachment between two epithelial cells of the capillary. It makes a hole in the capillary. The stem cell will then push itself into this hole and then takes all its content and pass it into that hole, into the other part of the cell. And after a while, it's all transferred through the capillary wall. Now it's in the tissue. Now in the tissue, after having used various adhesion molecules to cling to the bone mat, to the capillary, go through the capillary, the cell as a, I wouldn't call it a clock, but it's a process. Once you've gone through this process, SDF1 now will trigger a novel signal. It's going to be another set of adhesion molecule that connects to hyaluronic acid, which is the soft skeleton of that tissue. And so the cell will literally walk in the tissue following that signal of SDF1. So the cell will walk to the site of the injury. When the stem cell has arrived where SDF1 is being secreted, it starts to get into contact with cellular debris of that tissue, proteins that belong to the heart tissue, for example. When it gets in touch with that, the cell, now it's a signal, the cell triggers in the nucleus of that stem cell, the conversion or gene expression that now tells that stem cells, you need to multiply and you need to become a heart cell. And now the stem cells multiply, becomes a heart cells. And in this process, there is something that quite frankly, to this day is not very well understood, but the stem cell will not only become a heart cell, but will become a heart cells repairing the tissue according to the how could I say, the plan, the normal architectural plan of what the normal heart should be. So it's not just going to be a patch on the heart, it will become the heart as it was before. It's a beautiful process, almost miraculous.
Yeah, super fascinating. And so I assume, thank you, by the way, Christian, for explaining that complex process of stem cell mobilization and how it actually gets to the tissue and what it does once it gets to the tissue. I'm assuming that this process is the same across superficial injuries, across heart attacks, across nerve injuries, diabetes, all the other things that you mentioned at the beginning of this podcast are related to stem cells. Is that correct?
It is correct. The one little caveat that I will add is that if you have long-term injuries, sometimes the tissue almost like partially heals itself and stop calling for stem cells. Sometimes you need to almost like revive the injury. Let me give you an example. And we discovered that because we had a case. So if you see that, then you need to start to think what happened there. Right. For example, somebody who has had third-degree burns for decades, from third-degree scars from third-degree burns. So for decades. So these scars were very, very significant, very important in the face, chest, and arm. Now the person starts to release stem cells and starts to brush these scars, reactivating them. And within a year, all the scars had completely disappeared. These scars had been there for 5 decades. Why did stem cells not go there and repair them? So somewhere you have those injuries that's almost like close themselves and then stop signaling for repair. And if you reawaken them, then you restart the process of tissue repair. You just have to put more stem cells in circulation and restart it. So oftentimes when people say, can putting more stem cells in circulation help, for example, my knee? Yes, we have seen cases where the improvements was quite significant, but I will tell the person, make sure you go take a walk or you do something that will trigger just a little bit of pain or discomfort to bring this need to re-signal and recall for repair.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating, by the way. And two quick follow-on questions. By brushing, do you just mean dry brushing? Because people will be interested in scars very much.
Correct.
A lot of population has scars which they would like to be gone, but they don't know how. And so just dry brushing with a normal brush and then just taking your supplement, which we'll get to?
Correct. Take a brush that is rough enough, that will not make you bleed, will not create an irritation to the skin that is painful, but enough to make it red and feel that you're really rubbing that area. Take like a cotton brush, for example, something that is going to be, again, rough enough not to break the skin and go to blood. That is going to be enough to reactivate that skin. By the way, I mean, I'll talk about it. It's not simple to conceptually see it, but if you have a scar that is physiologically active, meaning that scar is still a scar that can be reactivated. Physiologically, if you touch it, it will release adrenaline because the body still experiences it as an open wound to an extent. So you just have to take your pulse at your wrist, you take your pulse and you touch that scar. And for about 1 or 2 heartbeats, you will see the heartbeat drop because of release of adrenaline that creates vasodilation. So if you pay attention, you can detect it. That scar can totally heal and repair if you start to brush it and put more stem cells in circulation, so more stem cells are available to migrate into that area.
Got it. And if it does not respond that way, if the scar is, so to speak, dead, then what happens?
I mean, you can probably still repair it. You may have to put a little bit more time and really reactivate it. It's not that you will reactivate the skin. It's just that you will create an injury. And then what I have seen over the years is that stem cells have this amazing ability to repair according to the original blueprint of the body. So it could lead to an attenuation of that scar, but it may not repair as well as if we see a physiological scar. Many scars are still physiological decades after.
Yeah, I believe it. Okay, so let's, one other follow-on question. When you said take a walk, if it's a knee injury or if it's a shoulder injury, move your shoulder, do some physical therapy, massage it. Is that to improve blood flow to that area, or how does that mechanism work? Or is that signaling new?
Signaling.
Signaling, okay.
It is signaling. Because when I say you signal to stem cells, it's an injury. So when you have an injury, the first response is inflammation because you want to increase the blood flow, the lymphatic flow in that area so that immune cells and stem cells can reach that area very quickly. That's the role essentially of inflammation. But you don't want inflammation as soon as you start to repair. You cannot repair a tissue that has inflammation. It doesn't go together. So the first thing that the stem cells will do when it lends into an injury is to suppress inflammation. So your stem cells are probably the most potent anti-inflammatory process locally, not systemically, locally. So whenever you have an injury or you reactivate an injury by walking, for example, the pain will signal for inflammation and stem cells because it's seen as an injury. So it's that signaling that is really relevant. And hopefully the stem cells, when they go there, will have an effect on inflammation. Normally they do.
Yeah, very interesting. Okay, one last follow-on question. I keep having follow-on questions here. People have been taking PRP or doing PRP, platelet-rich plasma, for decades to help heal cartilage and in joints. Is there any evidence that with stem cell mobilization and moving the local tissue or injury that there may be rebuilding of cartilage as well?
Yes, we have seen it. I can never say if it's going to happen in the case or not, because it's something that unfortunately with endogenous stem cell mobilization, the release of your own stem cells, it has not been studied enough to see what are the parameters that make it so that in one person you see it and in somebody else we don't see it. But yes, it has been seen. We have seen the rebuilding of cartilage. We have seen increased mobility, reduction in pain. This has been seen. I have no data to tell you the frequency of benefits. Like how many people? You take 100 people, how many of them will have benefits? I don't have that data.
Okay, sounds good. Still new science. All right, we're coming up on time, but I have a few more quick questions, which I'll get to you. So number one, what are some of the reasons that stem cells get degraded in somebody? For example, like you said, two individuals that are aging separately, outside of just mobilizing stem cells, are there any environmental factors, lifestyle factors that affect stem cells negatively?
Yes. Let me touch the first part of your question, which is aging.
Mm-hmm.
It is clear that as we age, our stem cells are not as effective as when we were young. Not only we have fewer of them, but they're not as effective. Let me explain that in a very simple way. You take a mouse will live roughly like a 10-month mouse is a very old mouse. So let's say you take a 6-month mouse, you trigger an injury and you inject stem cells taken from a 1-week-old mouse. And then you take another mouse, 6 months, you do the same injury, and you inject stem cells from a 10-month-old mouse. You will see that the younger stem cells are much more effective at repairing. So it's clearly understood that as you age, your stem cells are not as effective. There's a conclusion that I've heard sometimes made by various people that therefore past 40, your stem cells are irrelevant. Completely false. We have seen cases of people in their 80s getting amazing benefits by releasing their own stem cells. At any point in your life, your stem cells are still very effective at helping you repair. If you put more of them in circulation, more of them are available to be used by your body for tissue repair. If you have a chance of getting an injection of umbilical cord stem cells, younger stem cells, can that be helpful? Absolutely. You're going to reseed your bone marrow with younger stem cells, and you will continue to release them, in the rest of your life. So you kind of give a boost of young stem cells, to your body. So yes, it's good, but your stem cells are still very good as you age. Other things that you can do to reduce the ability of your stem cells to repair in your body, stress. If you have stress and you release cortisol, adrenaline, compounds produced by your adrenal glands, you will reduce the ability of stem cells to migrate in tissue and to proliferate. This has been done not as far as I know in humans, but in animals it has been shown. And as humans, we live in an environment where, is there a person that lives without stress? We live for decades with all kinds of stress. During all these years, the ability of our stem cells to repair and keep us healthy is lessened, is decreased just by stress. Good sleep, as you release melatonin, so deep sleep will help your brain repair. It supports the ability of brain stem cells to proliferate and repair. Smoking cigarettes will reduce the ability of stem cells like stress to migrate in tissues and proliferate. Alcohol was also documented to do the same thing. What else? Exercise will help you release more stem cells. That's what comes to mind right now.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, so great recommendations. People should start doing those regardless for a good life and a longer life, but especially also with the layering of stem cells, it's even more important. Let me ask you.
And there's also one more thing that comes to mind. Systemic inflammation will, in a way that would make probably too complex to explain, but systemic inflammation will, to an extent, reduce the ability of stem cells to identify the tissue that is in need of repair and quickly migrate in that tissue. So if you have a background of systemic inflammation, when you release stem cells, they may not be as effective as if you had a chance to reduce systemic inflammation. So I would say add colored food in your diet, pigments. Most pigments have some form of anti-inflammatory, systemic anti-inflammatory properties. So add vegetables, colored vegetables in your diet, curcumin, things like that.
Yeah, fantastic. So let's move on to what you've done and how you've isolated some compounds, some plant compounds. But before we do that, I have one quick question. If, let's say, you're obviously going to take, some of the supplements that you've come up with and the natural ways of releasing more stem cells from your own body. But if you had a chance to get an exogenous injection of supplements, which are of stem cells, which stem cells would you prefer? I think you mentioned umbilical cord. Is that the best?
Yeah, I think that's what I would do because not only it adds more stem cells, but they're younger. When we say we add more stem cells, sometimes I'm maybe a little bit cynical with this, but let's say we take your fat stem cells. So I take your fat, isolate stem cells, I re-inject them into your body. Well, you release them from your bone marrow every day of your life anyway. So I just gave like a little boost of additional stem cells, but give it a few weeks, few days, and everything came back to control and you're exactly where you were. you might as well just support the release of stem cells from your bone marrow. You get about, it's the same phenomenon physiologically. But when you talk about umbilical cord stem cells, there's another component here that is very significant. They are much younger stem cells. So you sort of reseed your bone marrow with a new lineage of younger stem cells that could say, sort of take the baton and then take the relay and now, accompany you as you age. So I would say umbilical cord stem cells.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Now, let's move on to natural compounds that you've developed in your research or through your own research that other people have found that actually help release your own stem cells from your bone marrow, basically. And so what are some of the compounds that you've found and why are they so promising?
Okay. Once we discovered that this blue-green algae was supporting the release of stem cells from the bone marrow, to me, it kind of solidified the fact that, yes, we can have plants that do this, but also stem cells are the natural repair system of the body. So the consequence of this, we have evolved in symbiosis with the environment. So there cannot be just one plant having an effect on stem cells. So it put me on that path of finding what are these other plants. So I simply asked the same question. We discovered AFA because it was leading to a broad variety of health benefits. So the question was, what else has been historically associated with a broad variety of health benefits? Goji berry for longevity, medicinal mushroom, ficoidan from seaweeds, those kinds of ingredients. So we went in the lab and we started to study them. So either known globally or known locally in remote areas of the world by local healers, and they are used for a broad variety of benefits. So we went to South America, Madagascar, Papua New Guinea, and we investigated plants used locally. And in this whole investigation, we found, I have about 5 plants right now that have been clearly shown to support the release of stem cells from the bone marrow. Within 2-3 hours after consumption, you have an increase with every single one of these plants. We have an increase of anywhere between, let's say, 35 to 60% in the number of circulating stem cells. So we have sea buckthorn berry from the Tibetan plateau. We have Allomacroclada from Madagascar. The original ginseng, Panax notoginseng. We have ficoidan coming from certain seaweeds. We have, what else do we have in there? And the blue-green algae, the original blue-green algae that we had shown. And we have them all at a dose that have been documented to support the release of stem cells from the bone marrow. This is what we have brought into the product that is called Stem Regen. And if I loop back to your question that you had before, can we damage the bone marrow by stimulating stem cells released from the bone marrow? One point here that is super interesting to keep in mind is that all these compounds, aside from the blue-green algae, all the others, we discovered them because historically they have been used for centuries, some of them thousands of years, for a broad variety of health benefits. These compounds have been used, these plant extracts have been used for a long time, and they have not been associated with anything that could be remotely associated with depletion of the bone marrow. It just does not exist. It's not something that we develop.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Yeah, it's very promising. And thank you for sharing so much about the research, how stem cells get activated, and especially how they're in the bone marrow and they're needed for long-term health and anti-aging. It's fantastic. I've been reading, like I said, I've been reading your book, Cracking the Stem Cell Code, over the last few days. And folks, the supplement is called, if I can hold that up properly, Stem Regen. It's not showing up. Stem Regen.
It's fuzzy.
Yeah, it is fuzzy, but I'm showing that up on the YouTube, if you will, for folks that are listening. Okay. But the supplement is called Stem Regen. I'm about to actually start using it in the next few days because there's a long-standing shoulder chronic injury that I've had, and I'm going to throw a few things at it. And I'm especially excited about the Stem Regen product to improve the stem cells in circulation to heal my shoulder. The last question, I guess, in terms of life extension, longevity, how do you anticipate people getting on this at a certain age and then just staying on this to increase our stem cells in the blood?
I've been talking about stem cells, stem cell mobilization for now more than 15 years. The information is very slow to penetrate the general population. So I'm doing everything I can to bring forth that information. because I do believe that when that information really circulates in the general population, this is something that can completely change our understanding and our experience of health and wellness. You develop problem as you age because you don't have enough stem cells in circulation to maintain your tissue. There's tons of science beyond that information. If everybody can release more stem cells and have more stem cells to help repair and maintenance of tissues, we can change the face of the planet in terms of health and wellness. So in terms of anti-aging, to me, it is almost like the core aspects of anti-aging. If you put more stem cells in circulation every day of your life, you allow your tissue to renew, so you will not develop the problems that are the accumulation of everyday decline or not having enough stem cells in your tissue every day to repair and maintain your tissue, which is what we see in people who have developed these problems. They all have about half the number of stem cells that you find in healthy people. So yes, putting more stem cells in circulation is going to really change, I believe, health of anybody that gives it a shot. So I'm thinking that, yes, if you're really, really about health and biohacking, I would say when you're in your 30s and you have your health, then keep it. That's when you start maintenance. If you don't start then, and then you start later, when you start to have a problem that doesn't go away, and now you say, well, let me now try stem cells for that problem, then you have a good chance to see some benefits to that problem. Now, the question is, when the problem is gone, do I then stop taking it? Because that will be like asking, well, when I give a boost to my stem cells and I help my body to repair, do I now stop and wait to develop the next problem to try to reverse it? So once we see what stem cells can do, to me, the logical conclusion is that I've seen what it does to that one problem that I had, but it's the same thing is happening. I wouldn't say subconsciously, but everything is happening subclinically, let's say, in your body. Every single tissue is going to this process of aging. It may not have reached a threshold when you start to experience it as a decline in your quality of life, but it will come. So if you help your tissue to repair and renew when you still have your health, well, you'll keep it as you age. That, I believe, would be sort of the sound understanding of what your stem cells do for your health.
Yeah, like we said at the onset of this podcast, they are one of the hallmarks of aging. And it's not like you don't need more as you get older. So it will serve you to keep replenishing them over the long term. And it has to become a lifestyle almost. Because maybe if you have an injury, you can use stem cells and you can do a few things to kind of heal the injury. But then, as Christian said, long term, all of your cells are aging at a slow rate or faster rate, depending on how you're aging. But to stop that, it's not simple at this moment. Aging is very complicated. And again, stem cells can help. So with that said, Christian, thank you so much for coming on the Anti-Aging Hacks show. Where can people find the supplement? Where can they get your book? Tell us all about that.
If you go to Kalyagen.com, so www.kalyagen.com, then you can read everything about the product, can get the book. The book is on Amazon as well. So that's the place to go.
Okay, Kalyagen.com. Again, I've been reading the book. Fantastic read. And I'm going to start using the supplement. So Christian, thanks for coming on the show again.
Thank you so much.